For more on this, let's bring in Markos Kounalakis. He is a foreign affairs columnist for McClatchy D.C. and joins me now from San Francisco. Hi, Markos. During Friday's White House press briefing, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that North Korea must, quote, take concrete and verifiable steps before a meeting can take place. So what might those steps be?
Well, Tanya, usually those steps are decided before a president would go to a summit. But you can imagine that the Trump administration and the United States would like for North Korea to commit to some form of denuclearization before the summit takes place. Some level of commitment, I think, is what the administration would like to hope for, so that when you enter into a summit meeting, you know that you'll come out of it with something you really sought.
So do you think that President Trump got ahead of himself here? Do you think he promised a meeting that perhaps he was not quite ready for?
Yes, but this is President Trump's style. This is what we've seen for the last year plus in the way that he approaches, whether it's diplomacy or trade policy, what have you. It is uniquely a President Trump approach to, in this case, really an unprecedented level of summitteering.
And yet we have seen somewhat of the scenario before. Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush had attempted negotiations with the North Koreans. What's different about this time around?
Well, it is different. And the reason is that both President Bush and President Clinton had laid the groundwork for any level of discussion, so that there were discussions that were ongoing, and perhaps there are now also what we would call second-track diplomacy. We're unsure what those are, but we know for a fact that during the Bush administration and the Clinton administration, those talks were very active. We saw individuals and representatives of the United States government going to Korea to find and to have those negotiations, whether it was in the demilitarized zone or elsewhere. And they were laying the groundwork for what could have been, and never really became, a very a lasting or a solid negotiation or finalized plan.
Right. So hasn't it sort of been longtime U.S. policy to not legitimize the North Korean government by a meeting between the heads of state?
Yes, I mean, that is really it. This is all that Kim Jong Un really wants, is to have the head of state, the head of the United States, come to him or wherever it is they may meet, so that they are standing side by side. It reminds me a little bit of the visit that candidate Trump wanted so desperately during the election in Mexico with the president of Mexico, Peña Nieto, and Nieto Peña. And he really wanted to have that level of legitimacy on the international stage.
Right.
Kim Jong Un just got it.
So he's sort of ahead of the game. He's already got this legitimacy, as you say. Do you believe, though, that North Korea would actually give up some of their nuclear plans or their nuclear weapons?
Well, sure. I think that anything is possible. I mean, we are entering into unprecedented negotiations, and who knows? I mean, there could be some level of grand bargaining that the president is currently engaged in. I don't know to what degree he is engaging the Chinese to be able to help us in what our ultimate goals are, which are making sure that that nuclearized peninsula is nuclear free from the north side. I'm assuming that they're trying to do anything they can at this point to make sure that the outcome is a positive one.
Right. So that is, of course, the hope. The State Department, however, does not seem to be as full as it once was. Joseph Yoon, a top diplomat in charge of North Korea policy, retired from the State Department last week. There's still no ambassador to South Korea. But Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says he's not losing any sleep over it. Here's what he had to say Friday while in Kenya.
I think if you look at the results that we're getting in very important policy areas, and you mentioned North Korea and the open positions we have there, I think as we've seen in the last 24 hours, the policy that was put in place and has been executed by the State Department over the past year has succeeded. And we've done that in spite of the fact that we have people serving in acting positions in some cases.
So do you agree with Secretary Tillerson, or do you think that these vacancies will ultimately hurt the negotiation process with the North Koreans?
Well, I think you want to go to any level of game with your full team playing. Having said that, what's going on in this administration and in this White House, and by the way, it's not just this White House, it's occurred previously as well, has been the moving of foreign policy into the Oval Office or into the White House itself, so that the players inside the White House are the ones who are really deciding the policy. You still want a full team at state who can implement and make sure that they get your bases covered, that you're able to bring to bear all the tools of diplomacy that you have in the United States. But in this administration, there is a great reliance, whether it's on a son-in-law, Jared Kushner, or on the president's instincts to drive our foreign policy.
But isn't a meeting between the heads of state sort of putting the cart before the horse? Don't you want to have your lower level diplomats go in there first? Because once you've got the two top players, there's not a lot of wiggle room if things don't go well.
That's right. Essentially, Kim Jong Un has already won this negotiation because he's gotten everything that he wants if this summit actually gets pulled off. But what we want is very difficult. And if you don't have the groundwork laying, it's very difficult to achieve after you've already agreed to everything the other side wants. So it's not a terribly strong negotiating position. I think the United States and President Trump will probably assert those tools that we do have, which is a very strong military in the region. We have some trade policies that China is not very interested in us pursuing. So we're hoping, I think, and the president is hoping, that China will add enough pressure onto North Korea to get those things that the United States and the international community really want, which is a denuclearized peninsula.
Sure, and at least talks send a more peaceful message. It does seem to diffuse tensions a bit. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, Tanya. I mean, that really is the case. And we'll see that up until the summit, things will be much more peaceful. You can expect that. It's